Hello and welcome to the Progress Theory, where we discuss how to implement scientific principles for optimizing human performance. I am Dr. Phil Price, and on today's episode, we're joined by GB Powerlifting high performance coach, Ben Richens. Paralympic powerlifting is a little bit different to traditional powerlifting in that it focuses on one movement, that is the bench press. It's a sport that's growing in popularity, and we've got a strong contingent heading to the Tokyo Paralympic Games, all of which are coached by Ben Richens. However, despite its growing popularity, there are still many that are unfamiliar with the sport. In this episode, Ben takes us through the differences in programming and coaching for Paralympic powerlifting in comparison to traditional powerlifting, the common mistakes people make when programming, and if you want to get involved with the sport, how to do it. As always, follow and subscribe to The Progress Theory on Instagram, YouTube, and your podcast app. Here is Ben Richens. Ben, welcome to The Progress Theory.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
How is isolation?
It's tough. I actually ran out of things to do like 2 hours in. We got here Thursday, and I'm so bored. I've gone through.
It took you 2 hours.
YouTube. Yeah, and we've got food in the hotel, but it's not the best. So I'm just going through Deliveroo. I'm going every different restaurant and just snacking. It's great, but not for my bank balance.
Yeah. Well, at least you're a power lifter, so the increase in calories won't mind too much.
Yeah. The thing is, I'm right at the top of my weight class. So
it's the complete opposite then.
Yeah.
Ignore what I just said. Anyways, before we get to know you a little bit more, why are you in isolation?
So we as a Great Britain team, powerlifting side, we've gone out to Dubai. So that was the last qualifying competition before the Tokyo Paralympics. Unfortunately, Dubai's on the red list. So we've gone out, done our job, and we've been whisked straight into a 10-day quarantine. So it was great out there, but less great to come back into quarantine. My wife thinks that even more than me, to be honest.
Yeah, I bet. And you've completed YouTube already?
Yeah, I've just gone through all sorts of weird rabbit holes that I wasn't expecting, but good, yeah.
Well, let's know a little bit more about yourself. Like, what got you into coaching with the GB Paralympic powerlifting team? Or actually, maybe go a little bit further back. Like, when did we first meet and the journey which led to that?
Oh, right. I guess if I'm going all the way back, I started coaching about 23 years ago. That was in a YMCA, old school gym.
Old school.
Yeah. And then through the sort of years leading up to St Mary's, I think it was 2007, I had many sort of coaching and gym jobs, really working with different types of people, talking and interacting with different types of people in different countries as well. So that sort of led me up to work at the university about sort of 2006 or so, where I first got interested in strength and conditioning. I worked there for a bit, and all the sort of job roles which I was looking at really needed a degree. I didn't have one. I spent my early 20s enjoying myself far too much outside of uni. So I thought the sensible thing to do was go back as a mature student and choose strength and conditioning as a degree. So that led me to St Mary's. I think at the time it's the only university doing that degree, and that's where I met yourself and a few other fine practitioners.
The good days.
Yeah,
remember them fondly.
I do. I mean, because at the time when I first started uni, I was living in North London. So I look back at it now, where I get on the tube, have a 2.5 hour journey to southwest London each day, do classes, coach a bit at the end of the day, and then come back, and it's like a 14-15 hour day or something by all things told. But there were cool days though. You know, when you just you look back at stuff and your real formative years.
Yeah.
But they're long days, right?
Yeah. Great to reflect on, aren't they? The like hard graft you had to put in. Like at the time, it's like really frustrating, but you look back with a certain fondness because you know how it shaped you today.
Yeah, I think I was talking a bit about that, my early years as working in gyms, working in those sort of environments with different types of people and people coming from different backgrounds, cultures and all that. I look back at it now and it really shapes the way that I can hopefully communicate to different people from different situations and experience and all that. So I guess I look back at that and go, that's a really, really valuable experience to shape me as a coach and something which I guess I'd suggest other coaches, young coaches do is like, just give yourself these wide experiences where you get to talk to and interact with loads of different people because it just gets you better at communication.
Yeah, I really think that's the key with early development. Just try as many new experiences as possible, and you don't really see the relevance of it at the time, but when you look back, you really like, oh, I learned certain skills there that I just suddenly applied without realizing.
Yeah, I think it just helps sharpen your vision of what you really want to get involved with and maybe not. And if you're only involved, I don't know, coaching in one sport, you really do get a somewhat narrow focus, which could totally work with some people, but maybe not with others. And it's something which I've really cherished, where I just got involved with lots of different sports, especially in that St Mary's time. Which I thought was really beneficial.
So what made you eventually narrow down towards powerlifting and then Paralympic powerlifting?
So it wasn't a plan at all. I did like weightlifting when I was at St Mary's. When I came to St Mary's, I was still running, and that was my plan. I was going to get involved in 800-meter running again. But the weather was horrible, and I really, at the end of like this massive day in lectures, I really didn't want to go back on a track and just run around it again. So the next best thing was this weightlifting team, which we got involved with. Yourself, Rob Anderson, Adam Spence, all these guys. We seemed to sort of find each other at the right time, and we just started lifting together. So part of the reason was a bit laziness from my side, and just finding a common thing that we all like to do. Going into finding actually powerlifting, which is, again, you look back on it and it's like, this is so weird how it all worked out. I was going into my third year, the year where you're going, I'm going to have to find a job now. This is a little bit frightening because I'm 28, 29 years old. I need to pay the bills. And so through that sort of third year, I think it was over the course of 4 months before I graduated, I went for about 6 or 7 jobs in the EIS and a tennis academy and all these different things. I think badminton as well. And I just didn't get any. I made like the final cut for some, and it was between me and maybe another person, and that person would always get it. And I remember just feeling like pretty dejected about it, because there'd been like 6 or 7 refusals on the trot. Like, sorry, not quite there. And this job that I went for was actually a talent ID scientist. So a little bit out of the S&C specialism, but I thought, hey, I just go for it and see what it brings. And a job's a job in high performance sport. You can't turn your nose up on that. So let me go for that. And I went through the EIS, the English Institute of Sport process, which is quite involved and quite deep. Got down to the final 2, yet again, didn't get the job yet again. And I just remember going, you know what? I don't know what I'm going to do. But then I got a phone call from the person who's doing the interviewing, and she said, I thought you were really, really good in this interview. I think you should keep going. And she wanted to suggest I go for another job opportunity which came up, which was with British weightlifting, and it was through Powerlifting, which I'd seen before anyway. But basically, I had this sort of nervousness of going for it. But since she was involved with that program and she suggested that I should go for it, I went for it. Did the interview. I remember my fond memory of Leeds was getting there. First time I've ever been that north up, to be honest, the country. I turned up at the train station, and there was like loads of these great delicatessens and food places and all that. But there was these just massive lines out of Greggs. I was like, wow, people up north really love Greggs. So I went to the interview. Thankfully, I got the job. And that's sort of the position sort of morphed into different things over the years. But I'm now sort of lead performance coach in Powerlifting. So I guess that's where I am now.
For those that are a bit unfamiliar with the sport, what are the key differences between powerlifting and para-powerlifting?
They're definitely more similar than they are different. I sort of characterise para-powerlifting as well as powerlifting as a sport of strength, technique and strategy. Obviously, strength says for itself. You need to test near your physical capabilities, how you can get a barbell to arm's length, or if you squat it or deadlift it, how you complete the movement. Obviously, technique's important, and one of the key differences in powerlifting is the standard, the lift, the bench press is refereed, is could be said to be somewhat stricter than 3-lift powerlifting.
Okay.
So what the referees are looking for execution-wise is they're looking for really good control on the way down, a really motionless pause on the chest, and really good equal pressing to lock it out. Whereas in powerlifting, you can press it unequally to get it to arm's length. There might be a little bit of a bubble on the chest. As long as it's paused, that's fine. I guess the other main difference that you can see when people competing in it is in powerlifting, you're lying down with your feet stretched out on a wider bed. Apart from that, things like changes in weight increases, powerlifting's a lot like weightlifting, where you'd have 1 kilo increments, versus powerlifting you'd have 2.5 kilo increments in the weight you can select. And probably the most stressful thing for me anyway, personally, is in powerlifting, there's a lot more involvement in field of play. So, for example, in powerlifting, the referees would call all of the actions. So they tell you when to start, when to come up, and when you can finish and put it back. In powerlifting, the coach or the lifter self-selects their pause quality. So, for example, the referee would tell you when to start. I would then call the pause on the chest, so I'd shout drive or press, and the referee would then call back. So, I mean, one of my remaining fears is basically I'm going to bodge the job up in competition, that I'd either forget about it, squeal in a high voice of a press, or any connotation of like embarrassing things which could happen, or which might deem the athlete not to get a lift. But I guess those are the main differences.
So it's the athlete themselves are telling the referee when they're and how they are pausing and pressing.
Yeah, well, yeah. So in the rules of powerlifting and para-powerlifting, you have to have this motionless length of time where the bar's stopped on your chest, and it goes in powerlifting. The referee would tell you when that is. In para-powerlifting, either the coach will give a signal when that is, or the athlete will choose it. But that athlete or coach could get the decision wrong, could get that length of time wrong, which would then deem the ref to say it's not a lift. So a bit more pressure on us, basically. Yeah.
Is there a certain amount of time it has to be paused for? So it's almost like the pause is being timed.
Yeah.
And if it's under that time...
So interesting enough, no. Right now, no. I don't know if you've seen the rules say it has to be motionless for a period of time. They don't say what that period of time is, a noticeable amount of time, but it's motionless. But interesting enough, actually, I'm not sure if you've seen it, but there's Alekia have come out with some accelerometers which can be placed in bars, and with the bar tech and how I've seen it is there could be some things which go into that, which standardise pause lengths to the referees, I think, in the future. So maybe that, and that's also the case in weightlifting as well. They've got it in some of their weightlifting bars in the near future. So that's quite an interesting topic to see, the integration of sports technology within the rules of sport. But yeah, be interesting.
Yeah, it sounds really interesting. You've had a lot of success with the GB powerlifting team. What's been your greatest accomplishment over the last few years? Because I follow you on social media, and you're often jetting around the world, and every time that you go away, there's always reports of like gold medals and a really good team camaraderie in that sport. So I want to know a bit more about yourself as a coach, but how you work with the team.
There's two dividing things on me, right? So I'm going to not answer the question in one bit but then answer the question in another bit, right? But I think I was thinking about prior experiences outside of this sport as well. But just the difference of accomplishment, so level of accomplishment versus level of fulfillment in sport. And just looking on previous experiences in work, there's been a quite big difference for me personally in when I've worked in maybe higher status teams. Like I worked in a football academy, I co-owned a gym, and although those could be said to be quite high accomplishments, it didn't really give me much fulfillment at the end of the day. And I was thinking, like, why is that? Why didn't I get as much fulfillment as I do in this job right now? And it was like, I was thinking about, especially in a football academy, I was like, this lack of, or what I felt to be a lack of creativity, growth in the sport, this how I could express myself, this sort of sense of belonging in this job, which I felt really wasn't maybe present as much as the prior examples, but were much more in my current situation and some other situations which I've found myself in. So I guess there definitely have been some roles which I really regard highly, like this role which I did with GB Women's Under 23 in Ultimate Frisbee, which is an awesome sport. Like I really had the ability as a coach to express myself, be confident in the ways I was working, felt like I could express myself and grow with the team, and really felt like what I was doing was making an impact. And I really had high fulfillment in that, versus maybe other roles which I didn't really feel that. And that's, again, partly maybe where I was in my life at that time as well. But yeah, I mean, just going over to other coaches and maybe us seeing that we will always want to go to the highest level of accomplishment and work with X team or whatever. But if all those things are not there, I don't think it's as fulfilling as maybe a lesser regarded role, but we can be ourselves in that role. We really feel valued. All of those sort of things I think are a lot more fulfilling. Anyway, right, now I'll go answer your question a little bit more. In this current role, I reckon the experience I treasure quite highly. There's two actually, but the main one was going away with England into the Commonwealth Games in 2018 in Australia. It's, the place is cool in itself, but what we did there as a team, I worked with Aaron Singh, the other coach there, and we won 3 medals, two bronzes and a gold. And the way that the guys won them was just really impressive. And the way that the guys conducted themselves in that competition was just uber impressive. That along with, again, the 2018 Europeans that we went to, where I think it's the only comp where I've seen that every person who went away won a medal.
Wow.
And we're talking about, I think there was 9 or 10 people competing in that competition. To go away at Europeans and everybody medal, again, is like pretty impressive, and it speaks volumes about all of the team, all of the nutritionists, the physio, the lifestyle support, everybody. It just speaks to volumes about the education work that they've done with the guys and what we've done as a team. That's really fulfilling.
What's the Invictus Games? Because they look really, really exciting.
Yeah. The Invictus Games is a multi-sport games for injured military veterans. So whether they've acquired injuries through mentally or physically, it's a really powerful vehicle for sports rehabilitation. Thankfully, it's one of those ones that I got involved in 2014 with it. And I joke with my performance director. He approached me and said, "Ben, do you want to take this opportunity? I mean, I think it'd be really good for your development as a coach to be a lead coach, a head coach for powerlifting on it." But I look back and I just go, I said to him, "You just didn't want to do it, did you? You wanted a few weeks off." And it was such a great opportunity for me to learn as a coach. I definitely grew in that experience. And I've done a few now. I think next year will be my 5th games in Invictus.
Is it a yearly thing or like every 2 years?
Yeah, but every 2 years normally. It depends when. Again, on a sort of an Olympic year, often they spread it out and they might do it every year and a half or 2 years, depending when major competitions fall. They sort of try to avoid a Commonwealth Games or other games, so there's no clash there.
I guess a lot of the athletes are training for both, so they'll be training for the Invictus Games, Commonwealth Games, the Olympic Games. Yeah, there's just, I guess you wouldn't want to have anything like that overlapping. Yeah,
the schedule is quite mad. Again, talking about 2018, we had like the Europeans, and then pretty much, I think it was 6 weeks later, we had the Commonwealth Games.
Wow.
So we're pretty much back to back. And even with this, the rearranged Tokyo Games, we got the Paralympics, finishes the start of September. And then we're pretty much into our World Champs. So in November, so a couple months, 8 weeks, 9 weeks, then we're straight into the World Champs, which is like our real big milestone event for UK sport, to show that what we're made of, the sort of progress that we're making with the squad. So that's not only the Paralympic Games is important, but we've got a really good opportunity in the World Champs 2 months later, just to show how much progress we've made.
Have we got a lot of big contenders for the Paralympic Games?
Yeah. So we went out to Dubai, and that was a real dogfight, because the last competition of the qualifying period. So basically, the way that you qualify for Paralympic Games is in your weight class, you need to be within the top 8 of that weight class. So if you're 8th or 9th, you've got this weight target that you can hit, that you'll either beat and then you'll put somebody else out of position, or somebody else would beat you and then put you out of contention. So we got 5 out of 5 athletes that were eligible to qualify for the games, which is a really, really big team for us. And we've also got the possibility of 2 wild card slots with 2 of the younger guys who could possibly get wildcard entries to the Paralympic Games. So if we get 7, I think that'll be our biggest team ever. So, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, that's great for the sport, for it to really grow. More exposure, more people watching. great opportunity for people to get into the sport.
Yeah, I think it's a sport, if you compare it to athletics or swimming or canoe or whatever you might be. It's a smaller sport compared to those sports. But for me, it's just really surprising because it's a sport where the cost of entry is really low, and the availability of equipment. Any commercial gym's got a bench press, right? So if you're a person with an impairment, if you find the sport, you don't have to worry about finding an athletics track or buying an expensive racing chair, anything like that. You can just hop on a bench press and get involved and get better. So that's what I really want to drive going forward to Paris, is that we just have a load more people in the sport and just keep growing it.
What resources are there for people to get involved? We can always put them in the show notes if anyone listening want to get involved. A lot of information there that people can use and really grow the sport.
Yeah, I think the first resources connect with us through the British Weightlifting website. We've also got Instagram, which, to be honest, that's where I do most of my talent spotting. I identified a few people on Instagram, sent them a message, would you like to try this sport out? And they have, and it's been great for them. We've also got the High Performance Centre in Loughborough. So again, if people give us a shout, we can start a conversation, tell them how to get involved, how to do competitions, and then if they're available to come down there, we can have a look at them and show them the basics of powerlifting as well, if it's appropriate.
Right, let's get into some training. So with powerlifting, it's predominantly around the bench press, and then powerlifting, you've got the 3 lifts: bench press, deadlift, and the squat. Now, I'm assuming that the training for the powerlifting isn't just going to be a third of powerlifting just because they're doing one lift. I'm sure it's a lot more in depth as to what they do. So what kind of training or programming differences are there between the powerlifters and the powerlifters?
Yeah, I guess because there is that quite specific discipline, the bench press, and because your body can recover a lot more readily from just one discipline versus having to recover from squat volume, deadlift volume, and any other things. There's sort of often the amount of volume that we can do on specific bench press training can be increased. We know anyway, generally the bench press upper body exercise does respond slightly better to higher intensities over blocker training as well. So in terms of frequency of the competition specific exercise, we generally want to get people to be benching between 2 and 4 times a week. And that's split up into different sessions. And obviously we'll be looking at different variations of pressing exercises. So whether it's extended range of movement presses, partial range of movement presses, different overhead presses, and even super maximal loading bench press, whether it be through negative type work or even just use of flywheel stuff. We also just emphasize a lot on the other side of it, the accessory training. So we're looking at strong, resilient and robust shoulders, strong back muscles, and also like really robust trunk muscles as well, so they can hold position while we're going to be doing the bench press.
How much more important is that for the core training? Just because, but with a powerlifting bench press, they've got their feet strong on the ground, haven't they? And they can utilize that stability to drive force through the body, through the chain, to then into the bar with the bench press. Whereas because of the power guys, they're lying flat. They don't have that. They don't have that push down from the legs. So does the amount of core or trunk training change or increase because of they lack all the differences in technique here?
Yeah, I think so. First of all, we need to. It might be impairment and individual specific. So, for example, it could be an individual who had amputee, for example, who's a single leg amputee and he has some problems stabilizing alignment of the pelvis. I think that's quite important, and looking beyond powerlifting to quality of life as well. So a lot of the stuff that we value is, can we do exercises and teach the person how to live a life where it can allow them to train uninterrupted for long periods of time. Often in Paralympic sport, there might be underlying medical conditions, or situations which means they might be out of the sport for whatever reason, which isn't related to the sport. So part of our job is working with a physiotherapist, working with nutrition, working with all those other areas. Can we make sure that the person is healthy enough and can train for long periods of uninterrupted training to get them strong enough to be able to compete, and really importantly, have a good quality of life as well. One of the big things that we might have is we might have wheelchair users, and if we don't train them in a holistic, a respectful way to keep them injury free, and they injure a shoulder, then they might not be able to get around in their chair anymore, and that's a massive thing that we want to avoid, and it would definitely impact their quality of life. So there's absolutely the rationale that we train this ability to stabilize while people press high loads to the bench press. But I guess more importantly is, can we program and give them exercises which increase their quality of life as well?
Was that one of the aspects of coaching in this sport that was not a shock, but it's something you've learned a lot as you've gone or coached over the years? Because I can imagine someone being quite new to the sport, think, right, we're going to work on bench press, we need to just get strong in this area. Then as you get to know the athletes, you start to see how multifactorial everything is. And all of a sudden it doesn't become just about getting really strong at the bench press, even though that's the overall goal, because that's the goal of the sport. All of a sudden you've got to take into account all of these different things. I always think S&C is, especially at the elite level, is trying to make sure that they're on the pitch so they can, or on the court or whatever it might be, just so they can show why they're the best at the sport. You want to make sure that they keep playing the sport, and that's what's going to make them better. And then it kind of ties into a little bit with this. If you just think about the sport, then all of a sudden you might affect something outside of their sport that's then going to indirectly affect their sport. So it's so multifactorial, and that's only something you can really develop by working within that environment over many years.
Yeah, I remember the first time I got involved in Paralympic sport was through TAS, and it made me such a much more adaptable coach, in terms of, there's your basic back squat, and you're going to do that, but you might come into contact with a person who definitely can't master that movement pattern, or they might be an amputee. So you're going to have to think of this whole raft of single leg stuff, and they might just do an exercise and it just might not feel comfortable for them, just based on the way that their body moves. Especially, which was really interesting, working with spinal cord injury athletes who've just acquired the injury. And you might, many times we've had to look at actually how they transfer themselves from their chair to another piece of equipment, because the way that they're doing, they haven't, the NHS hasn't maybe had that time or thought or whatever it is to teach them those new skills. So the way that they're transferring is absolutely hazardous, and they're just throwing themselves on this bench or whatever, which in the long run might hurt them. So there's these sort of skills where you go, can I look at that person moving and how they transfer from their chair to a toilet to a bench to a whatever, and teach them these good athletic skills or good movement skills to go, that's going to have a really long lasting effect, not only just in the sport, but way after, because we're teaching you to move better.
Do you get quite good longevity in the sport because of making those training decisions?
I'd love to say it's our training interventions and our I think it is, but powerlifting's a sport where, as a physical quality, strength does linger on for a good amount of time. So we're seeing with the research that we've done with some of the male, especially male and female heavyweights, in para-powerlifting is they're going to sort of still compete at the top level at 45, 46, 47, 48 years old. So some of the guys we've got in the sport now, and they're turning up at 20 years old. It's a really it's a really good journey that you can sell them. That you could, if you take care of yourself, if you really look after your eating, how you look after yourself outside of the sport, sleep, all of these things, you could be around for the next 20, 30 years. I think that's really exciting, because in some other sports, it could be by the age of 29, 30, 31, okay, you're going to have to start looking at something else. And it's something which we've picked up athletes from other sports who maybe have been on not where they wanted to be, and they've seen powerlifting and they've absolutely picked it up and excelled with us.
Knowing that, does that change your programming approach? So instead of thinking, okay, they're going to come towards the end of their career at 30, you might make some certain programming or coaching decisions. But now you know that they could be reaching their peak in their late 30s and 40s. You think, okay, we're not going to rush you here. We're actually going to take more time to develop your strength qualities and hit these certain benchmarks over time. You've got that ability to then draw it out a bit longer, which will in turn improve their longevity in the sport, but you'd like to think also improve their quality of life.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword. I think in the UK we've got these quite these expectations from UK sport, from all sorts, that if there's going to be athletes in the sport, they need to show progress, and they need to show progress towards a medal zone and getting better if they are receiving funding, which is fair enough. But again, we through the sort of education that we provide with our guys is definitely based on giving these guys the tools and the ability to make good decisions through sleep, through exercise and nutrition, physio, lifestyle support, developing themselves outside of the sport as well. So whether it be a career path to continue after the sport, that we can do this. Instinctively, I feel with the group of athletes that we've got right now that there's going to be athletes who are going to be with us for hopefully the next 15, 20 years because they're of that age, and we've got a really good cohort who are rapidly getting better in the sport. And I guess most importantly, that you're always going to find athletes who just progress quickly. These talented athletes that, they get by on whatever. But then once they hit a certain level, they just plateau off because they haven't got these skills around how they look after themselves, how they eat, how they sleep, all those things which don't allow them just to keep ticking over when it gets tough. I believe we're doing the work now to equip these athletes who are talented, but also really, really inquisitive to learn how to be better. And that, for me, that stems from the education that we're doing with the guys almost on a monthly level, where we're having webinars, where we're having all these different things of how we can sleep better, what are the sort of decisions we can make overseas nutritionally, and how we look after ourselves from a prehab perspective. I think that's going to make the difference with this cohort athletes, hopefully.
That's wicked to know that you've got an athlete that has the potential, or a group of athletes that has the potential to be training for the next 15 to 20 years. As a coach, that must just think, right, okay, let's think big here.
Yeah, it's weird. I think, when we're talking about that question of coaching accomplishment, I'm really excited because about a year and a half, 2 years ago, we identified this bunch of athletes, this group of like 5 or 6 athletes who we thought had real good potential. And then we set their sort of trajectory in the sport of how they would grow and where they would go towards Paris 2024. So we're in the sort of midway of this journey with this new bunch of athletes and the remaining athletes on the world-class program. And it feels really exciting. And for me, selfishly as a coach, I think it's a really fulfilling thing where you can go, I saw this athlete when they're bench pressing 40 kilos or 50 kilos, and now we've been part of this journey which allowed them to put on 80, 90 kilos onto the bench press, and now they're possibly challenging for a Paralympic Games medal. I think it's uber cool. Like I can hopefully be part of this journey with them, because that's really fulfilling.
I've got this image of you looking down with a tear in your eye as someone bench presses about 100 kilos more than they did like 2 years ago. They're like uber proud just because of this huge bench press now. It's like, yeah, that's Ben. That is definitely Ben.
It's weird. We're talking about as a staff group. We're talking about like the sport is in some ways really so repetitive. It's bench press, right? So like, you need to find these little points in time where you can celebrate. So whether it's your first 2-plate bench press, or whether it's the first time you get GB kit, or whatever it is, because sport in itself can just be this such a big, long journey. And then before you know it, right, something happens and you're injured or whatever happens. And I just, I'm really keen on finding these key moments where you can enjoy the journey, and you can just have like these mini points of celebration of like, that was cool, awesome, but then we get back to work. No,
that's wicked. What common mistakes do you see people do when training for the bench press, particularly with power athletes? You kind of mentioned one earlier regarding, not looking after yourself outside of the gym, nutrition, sleep, all that sort of thing. But what other common, I guess, programming mistakes do you see people often making, which actually hinders their bench press progress?
I guess the two main ones are seeing what a very qualified and a very experienced athlete is currently doing, and then just trying to copy and paste that. So whether it be some real big bench specialized training, a big one in powerlifting is if you want to be a good bench presser, you're going to copy the grip width and the technical model the Japanese powerlifters do, which are very extreme. It's a very wide grip bench press, and they're training 14 times a week on bench press. And this Uber thing, which could possibly work for them, but people don't really go into the whys and how they've come across that. So, but they just go, "Oh, I'm just going to do that." So they're sort of like, in essence, not earning the right and not discovering why a certain person might do it like that, or do the amount of intensity, volume that group of individuals are doing, and they're just copy and paste wholesale. And because it's such a difference to what they're doing currently, they're probably going to get hurt because it's such a swing in the other direction. 9 times out of 10, people usually get hurt because of that. The other thing, which is slightly related, and personally as a young coach, I don't think I did this enough, but having ability, I should have developed a better ability to explore what worked and what didn't work for me through a series or through a training block. So not having the subjective and the objective measures to go to at the end of a block go, that wasn't quite what we wanted it to be. So whatever KPI or whatever we want to do, why didn't my bench press go up? Or, looking really, really more intuitively at maybe perhaps why something didn't happen. And then in the next block of training, just making a small change to see, was that sort of variable that we needed to change and learn from to see the change in the following block. Definitely something that I was guilty of as an S&C coach was I didn't take into consideration things outside of training which might be responsible for that not changing in physical condition. So me as an S&C coach would be, it's got to be because that person was squatting 4 times a week, and next time we'd bring them down to once a week, and that's the reason. Whereas really, they were eating horribly, they weren't sleeping, and all of these other, and it wasn't how many times a week they were squatting, it was all of these lifestyle factors which we needed to address first, and then we can look at the training interventions after that. If you've got the lifestyle stuff pretty much consistent and sorted out, you can make a lot better training intervention choices, which will then give you a more consistent picture of what works for the athlete going forward.
That's a really interesting point, actually. The more I've programmed over the years, I guess I used to sort of like, okay, what do I want to achieve? What kind of things do I want to put in the program? But now I'm very much just like, okay, when are their working hours? Put in when they work, because that seems to be one of the biggest things that contributes to stress, which affects the program. So if I haven't programmed or taken that into account, whatever I put out there is never going to be optimal for that person. I think that it's a theme that's getting out into the wider training community, just how much all of those other lifestyle factors actually affect training. And if we don't sort them out, then it doesn't matter what the training is, it's not going to be done to its full potential. It's so easy to go, they didn't achieve that, because then you go straight to that, those objective markers, straight to the program. But then again, you could have made a change or done a different program and had the same result, because like you said, the training or the lifestyle factors are just not on point.
Yeah, I think it's just for us as an S&C coach, and me personally, communication-wise, it was a whole lot easier to change that certain exercise than to have the more difficult conversation of like, mate, your sleeping really is appalling. If there is things that we want to achieve in this sport, sleeping 4 hours a night and then trying to go into a heavy, important session, over the long term, it's just not going to cut it. And can we have that difficult conversation? Can we do the more difficult thing out of the gym? And then the training decisions become so much more accurate and so much easier. But yeah, again, like another key skill for me as a coach, definitely going into this role, was having the ability to have difficult conversations, the ability to talk to somebody of an opposing viewpoint and both of you get what you need to get out of the conversation. I think that that was massive for me, or even an athlete culturally saying something which is inappropriate, and how you as a coach can bring that up and resolve and make sure like the cultural sphere in your team is good and appropriate, and how to approach it if people are going against that.
How would someone get into coaching powerlifting? Because what you described there are a number of skills which are so essential for an S&C coach, but it'll be hard to develop them. It's not something you can just read about. It's great that people will listen to this podcast and be more aware of them, but you don't really truly understand until you're actually in the environment and coaching within that environment. So if someone is looking into getting to coaching into powerlifting, what would your recommendations be? So
it's not, it's again, I'm going to dodge the question a bit, but then I'm going to go back to
Sounds
it.
Good.
So me as a coach, so if I'm going back to this sphere of coming out of university back in 2011 or 2012, when it was the best thing that I did is to develop my passion for high performance coaching and my development as a coach. The best thing which I did and look back on now is I started to create something for myself, which was working in St Mary's Powerlifting Club. So creating and coaching through that sphere, something which was, I guess, my own, and I could put my own stamp on. I thought that was really powerful and allowed me to develop as a coach. So there's all sort of different levels of how you can do it. Whether, again, it's like have a podcast and talk to really interesting people and develop your communications skills, whether it's like create something where you volunteer at an athletics club, or you create resources on strength and condition, whatever it is. I think there's so much power in the ability for you to go out on your own and create something which is distinctly yours. I'm getting too deep on this now, aren't I? But yeah.
No, that's a great message. Yeah. And there's so much software and avenues for people to be able to do that now.
Yeah. And that's, and generally, I think when you start to do that, you then generally start to find where you really want to be and what you really cherish. And that's where you start to get to this level of like deep fulfillment in what you're doing, and this passion for that specific area which you're going onto, which you can't really do when you're just going around and just sort of like, doing whatever comes to your head. But that creation, I think, is really, really powerful. In terms of powerlifting, I think the sport itself needs more clubs, and it needs more sort of areas for people to come and experience the sport. So just from a sort of grassroots level, getting involved and contacting the British weightlifting or myself and say, I've got this area which I think would be fantastic, and I've got this facilities which I can use on a weekly basis. I remember when I first started the powerlifting club up for St Mary's, there was this period where I had 6 months when nobody came, and it was every Wednesday and every Saturday there was no powerlifters coming, absolutely none. And it'd be, okay, well, I turned up on a Saturday afternoon, for an hour and a half, and I just used to train on my own, and train with some of you guys and whatever. And then suddenly one person came, and then another lifter came, and I think, by sort of 2 years in, we were bringing 6, 7, 8 people to British Championships, and it was a real good club environment. So give it time, link it to something which you're really interested in, and just create something, and that you can enjoy it.
Build and they will come.
Yeah, absolutely. And if they don't come, you can just train yourself. So
which is fun anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no losers here. And that's really that's a lovely message to sort of almost finish up on, because, right, we want more clubs. Please, anyone can do it. It isn't something that you need loads and loads of qualifications to do. If you're passionate and want to get involved with powerlifting, do it. Start a club, contact British Weightlifting, like you said. And then from that, you can then bring in different athletes. You can start the strand of powerlifting with it. But just start a club. Just get people involved. And that's how the sport grows. That's how the culture grows. And we need to be encouraging that more.
Absolutely. Again, I think one of the unique things about powerlifting is I think it's one of the only power sports, if you compare it to Olympic sports, where I just did some research just before I came on. But if you compare 8 of the world records in powerlifting with the 8 in a similar bodyweight class in powerlifting or the bench press, 7 out of those 8 weight categories, powerlifters are stronger than their able-bodied counterparts. So, like the ability for you to get stronger, which just makes you more confident, allows you to do things better. It's more difficult to kill. All of those things and just being addictive, this process of just improving yourself and getting stronger, I think it's really cool. I think it's something which people can get really involved in.
Yeah, exactly. This has all made me want to go bench. I haven't benched in ages, but I might have to this afternoon. I'll just build one out back.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm stuck here for the next 8 days. I can only do press-ups, but yeah.
Mate, you can lift that bed. Just sort of sneak yourself underneath it, floor presses.
Or somebody would just find me on day 8 underneath the bed, just in a mess.
The cleaner comes in and you're sprawled underneath it. You haven't left there for 2 days.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyways, Ben, this has been brilliant. The last question I want to give to you is the question that we give to all of our guests. If you had to pick one guest to come on to the Progress Theory, who would you choose? Now, this doesn't have to be anyone within powerlifting. It could be anyone that you just want to hear from.
Okay. I'm going to go same thing along my theme. And to be honest, recently in the last couple of years, there's been some really good thinkers coming out of free lift powerlifting. And there've been some really good thinkers who think about powerlifting, but also the ability just to get stronger in general. So in terms of the amount of information, programming wise, how to track training, how to progress training, I think there's some really good thinking there. So people like Mike Teixeira, Bryce Lewis, the guys from Data Driven Strength, they on Instagram, they come up with some really thought-provoking ideas. So for strength and conditioning coaches who are really looking to delve into that, I think they pose some really good questions and answers and ways to inform best practice. So yeah, all interesting guys to get on, mate.
Well, I'll have to follow them on Instagram and then send a message out. It sounds like the exact type of topic that we'd want on the Progress Theory. You know, something
Absolutely.
That's challenging the status quo when it comes to sports science and training. Cool. Anyways, Ben, how can people contact you if they want to ask you a message, or it could be anything about powerlifting, that sort of thing?
Best way to contact me is through Instagram. My handle's at SFB Training. So yeah, contact me through there, and I can give my email address to put in the description and things like that as well. But yeah, I'll do it like the cool kids and Instagram me. DM me or
DM you, slide into your DMs.
Yeah.
Anyways, Ben, that's been brilliant. Thank you so much, and I'll speak to you soon.
You're welcome. Thanks, mate.